Zookeepers. What animals do you most enjoy taking care of, and which are the worst? I did a behind-the-scenes article on a zoo once and spent time with zookeepers and vets. A really chilled conversation trust in Jersey, Channel Islands. The lemurs were not kept in cages because they needed space to roam from tree to tree. The zoo figured out that they had their area that was home, but they were free to leave any time they wanted. There was nothing to stop them wandering off. They didn't leave. They were happy there, apart from the father of the group who would, about once a month, decide he needed a break from the family and head over about 400 yards down the road to the pub. They would get a call from the pub saying that the furry little guy is hanging out in their garden again. Most of the time, he'd just wander back. People and animals truly are more alike than we think. It sounds like a regular English dad wandering down to the pub to take a break. My sister is a zookeeper. We asked her and her keeper friends which animal they would least like to be trapped in a room with. They all immediately, unanimously agreed on one animal, chimp. As one keeper put it, if a lion gets out of a cage, I would run and help the public and other keepers. If a chimp got out of its cage, I would run to my car and drive away. I did animal control for almost a decade. Wasn't afraid of nothing, except chimps. I became a scared little girl when we got a loose chimp call. I don't blame anyone for being afraid of chimps. I mean, I'm pretty sure I heard that recently there's been sightings that chimps use, sharpened sticks now. Yeah, I'd be scared too. I worked at a museum that kept a large turkey vulture tethered to a perch in the center of an animal room. Children would tease this poor bird mercilessly despite the many signs and warnings. The bird sat in stoic silence. But almost once a day, at the perfect moment, he would hop down as one of the little chumps walked off and he'd grab them with his huge bill just above the belt line by their pasty, fat, little French fry-infused love handles, clamp down hard and then snap it back. Imagine someone grabbing you by the soft parts with a pair of channel lock pliers. Their scream and the nasty welt was always the same. By the time parents, teachers, and staff arrived, he would always be back on the perch, just staring still stoic. Best part of that job. I fed one of the sloths while volunteering behind the scenes at a zoo for a service organization, and it fell asleep halfway through chewing a pear slice. Then it woke up a minute later and finished it. It was definitely a cute animal. I volunteer weekly at a rescue center for birds of prey. I avoid the bald eagles unless absolutely necessary. Even our resident birds, which are non-releasable and some of whom have been in our care for their entire lives, are the worst. They are scared of everything and very finicky. We spent 6 weeks last summer adjusting one to a cart. It wasn't just when it rolled by. He couldn't stand any of the new carts just sitting there across from him. We used a grant to update supplies, including 8 new great collapsible rolling carts. We use them a lot, especially when we take birds off-site. Apparently, a bird thinks your product is a rolling death machine, and that is sadly not a suitable reason to return something. Other things bald eagles hate. Water horses being carried or unraveled, the sound of rakes on gravel, buckets up until 5 gallons, those are fine. Plastic bags, unfolding newspapers, shoelaces, key rings with 6 to 15 keys under and over seems to be okay. Birds I love. Peregrine falcons are straight up baller. Maybe we just have some amazing ones, but damn if these guys aren't the greatest. Nothing spooks them, not overly aggressive, and tolerate a lot, especially during camp season. Also incredibly smart. They learn routines very well and seem to be very perceptive. We try and train all resident birds for their safety and for our own. For example, most of our animals have to go to a specific perch and display a desired set of behavior, equivalent to sitting quietly before we drop food off. By far, these guys are the fastest to pick this up and other behaviors usually, and the best at complying. Barn owls. We don't get too many and only have 2 resident birds, but I love these guys. Very quiet and pretty tidy compared to others who destroy everything. Bald eagle. Here's a bonus. Cheetahs are the most disgusting of all the big cats. They destroy everything in their enclosures and will sit and roll around in their own mess. Zebras are douchebags. I have actually also heard that zebras have really awful attitudes. I work at a safari park and we have a bat cave. They're all Egyptian fruit bats in there, and for the most part they're perfectly fine around humans, bar a little anxious if I try to get too close to them while they're sleeping. One bat, however, is a right pain in my butt. His name is Clayton, and he's constantly hanging on the exit, which means I have to get him off it so people can leave safely. Unlike all his fellow bats, he doesn't fly away the moment I get too close to him. Instead, I have to literally poke him until he does go away. Yesterday, he was chilling in his usual spot by the exit while eating a piece of pear. I poke him to get off and move as usual, and the little poo squeaks at me, which is bat for sod off. Frickin' Clayton, man. I'm a zookeeper in Colorado. It's hard to pick favorites because I really enjoy working with so many species, but I'll tell you about a few. African black-footed penguins are adorable and all have their own personalities, so they're really fun to work with. Most of the unpaired females are also very affectionate towards their keepers, and it's always the best when they follow you around and flirt. North American river otters are also one of my favorites. They're cute, smart, and really interactive. They play with most of the things we give them and recognize us when we call or are standing outside the exhibit. One of our older females will swim next to you at the exhibit glass and follow and chase you if you move around. Some bears are hilarious and also really smart. They like to climb around and will figure out where food is no matter where you put it. Every morning, I walk up to their holding and greet our male by blowing gently in his face. That's how they say hello. Ring-tailed lemurs have great personalities and have the added bonus of being adorable. They will also follow you around and sit next to you when we're weeding their exhibit. When I have treats, they will hold your finger and ask nicely to get one. We had one young male who had no concern for personal space and would hold my shoulder, tapping on my arm and trying to pry open my hand for treats if I was sitting down. They also make the cutest noises of any animals ever, in my opinion, and they are always cuddling with each other. I can't really think of any animals I hate taking care of, but if I have to choose, squirrel monkeys are really gross. They poop everywhere, propping walls, ceilings, and super grabby. I've had my hair pulled a few times, but luckily they're small enough to not cause the kind of damage an ape or larger primate could. They're still fun animals though, and I'm happy to work with them. I worked at a marine rehabilitation center in Costa Rica for a year. The sharks were cool dudes. Worst they would do is grab the feeder stick and not let go, which makes it really hard to keep feeding them, but you can't really negotiate with them. The caiman were alright, but I never did find a way to hang the meat piñatas that didn't break the rope or break the tree branches over the enclosure, which was frustrating to me and the caiman. The sloths are not bad, but they can move very fast if you make them angry. Those claws will open you up something fierce, like down to the bone. It didn't happen to me, but I watched it happen to another employee. The males will fight each other given the chance, and holding and touching them is so very uncomfortable because they are literally just flesh bags of skin and bone. But the sea turtles were the biggest jerks you could ever imagine. Let me share some stories with you. Our turtles were lazy, spoiled pricks. You had to drop the food directly into their mouths and try to avoid getting bitten, or else they would let it fall to the bottom of the tank, at which point you had to walk back into the building and get a net to scoop the food and try to feed them again. They would not die for it. We had one turtle in a 90,000-gallon tank. You could imagine it would need to be cleaned, and the only way to do it was with a snorkel. Our turtle, Mario Fernando, would swim up and bite my butt for fun while I was cleaning the tank. This species of turtle have beaks, and a bite to the butt hurts like a mother. Plus, it required medical attention from the town doctor that laughed like crazy and took pictures of my turtle-chewed butt for his friends and Facebook. No, Costa Rica does not abide by IDOWorkHereLady laws. So I would have to attempt to clean the glass on the tank and always watch for that little prick to be sure he wasn't anywhere near me. He would also float and play dead all the time to lure me into checking on him, then, you guessed it, bite my butt. But the worst turtle we had was Shenanda. Shenanda lived in a big round tank outside that would get filthy. They are filthy creatures. The tank had a big PCV drain in the bottom that stuck up about 3 inches higher than the bottom of the tank, and the only way to clean the tank was to drain all the water out and then use a push broom to shove the gunk and poop down the drain. Shenanda thought the tank cleaning day was her day to get revenge for everything that had ever gone wrong in her life thanks to humans. So the first time I got told to clean her tank, my co-workers hand me thigh-high plastic waders and the broom and show me how to begin draining the tank, then head to lunch. I set all this in motion, and when the water is low enough, I hop into the below-ground tank with Shenanda, but I notice she is swimming around the drain a lot. Whatever, I let her do her and start scrubbing the tank's walls. Eventually, the water gets low enough that it is almost falling below the drain when I hear a suction noise. Shenanda has allowed herself to be suctioned to the top of the PVC drain, and she is giving me the stink eye and flapping her flippers like like she's upset that she's stuck. So now I am standing in ankle-deep turtle poop in plastic boots in the Costa Rica sun, sweating to death and trying to figure out how to safely, without getting bit, move a 150-pound plus snapping sea turtle off this drain so I can finish cleaning her tank. Everyone that could help me move her is at lunch. I am pretty much alone in the park except for the admin and office people, and no way are they climbing in to help me. Worst of all, I realized I had forgotten my ladder, so I couldn't even get myself out of the tank to get help and find shade or do something about the situation. You might be thinking this is a one-off thing, but it wasn't. Shenanda would suction her butt to the drain every single time I cleaned that tank for the year I worked there. She knew exactly what she was doing. Also, birds of prey smells terrible, like musty death. Well, I kinda don't blame Shenanda for feeling that way when you gave her that name, and it basically is close enough to shenanigans. Welcome to Shenanda's Shenanigans! Not a keeper, but I was an intern at the zoo for several years. Some of my favorite animals to work with were the polar bears, the rhino, and the big cats. The bears and cats were just staggeringly awesome. Big, beautiful creatures I'd only seen in movies and pictures before, not 15 feet from me. It always took my breath away to be that close and care for those sorts of animals. The rhino was just a big old goofy guy. He played fetch, he ran up to you for treats and scratches, and honestly was pretty similar to a dog. That rhino could always put a smile on my face. Least favorite? The birds and greater apes. The birds were mean, loud, and smelly. I have scars on my knee from penguin bites because I wasn't feeding them fast enough. They just crap everywhere, and you get to scrub it off the rocks for hours. I know that it's part of the deal with being an intern, but it made me pretty much hate those birds. The greater apes, aside from the orangutans, just scared me. They're smart, stronger than us, but lack the compassion and humanity we have, and you know it when you work with them. If there was ever an animal I was truly afraid of, it was the chimps. I flat out refused to work with the mandrills after the first day. That being said, the chimps bonded incredibly well with their actual keepers, and more than once came to keepers for comfort. At one point, our male chimp got out, was stuck in a tree, and his keeper went out and held hands with him while leading him back to the enclosure. That poor man had to take 2 weeks to mourn when that chimp passed away a few years ago. They were really close. Volunteered at a zoo for a few years. The giraffes were the easiest cleanup, except for rainy days. The lemurs were sweet and you could feed them by hand, either by putting food in their faces or in their little hands. The barnyard animals were fine, although the sheep would walk uphill from me and boo at me like Welsh nightclub goers. The camels would chill. No, they don't spit. The ones there never spit. I was told that when you beat them or terrorize them, they will vomit on you, and that's what's called spit. These guys never had a bad day. The worst was an elephant with PTSD. She tried to murder several keepers and would throw rocks at them while I observed her and her crew. I'd hold a clipboard and do observation. The chimps were the most dysfunctional family I'd ever seen, and I grew up in Mafia, Brooklyn. They had a bobcat who spent his days napping. I liked him and noticed the keeper had no problem going in the cage and tidying up around his sleeping form. He'd get up for chow and to play with some toys and then go back to sleep. Not a zookeeper, but when I was in high school, the seagulls would attack people during lunch. Our school was like a small college campus. They would fly by in the hundreds from the middle school a few miles away because we were disgusting and left trash everywhere. They knew when our lunch period was and came every day. At first, we tolerated them, and they would generally avoid people, but then they weren't afraid of us anymore, and were more of a cleanup crew. After a year of this, they began to harass people for food, so we fought back, swinging our sweaters and backpacks at them. No one ever got one. And for some time, there was this sort of Cold War where the birds would just watch us eat and surround the schools, but would never come down until everyone was back in class. Human and bird relations were finally broken when they carpet-bombed the entire school, Pearl Harbor style. Feces rained down on people as they ran for what little cover there was. My friends and I watched in horror from one of the few places that had cover as people became peppered with white shot. The bathrooms were jammed with people lining up to clean themselves, while others left entirely. We didn't go outside for weeks until the horde moved on. Didn't really fit the criteria, but it was funny nonetheless, I can give it that. A wallaby named Wallace is my favorite animal in the world. Don't tell my girlfriend, but I like him more than our dog. He likes only me out of the 4 of 5 handlers he encounters. The birds are the worst. They've become aggressive with the staff since a particularly combative bird joined the big exhibit area. It's like they've learned that the other keepers and I pose zero threat. I got a few scrapes trying to get away from some flamingos a couple days ago. It's frowned upon to fight back against the animals, even if it's only restraining an attack. I've heard stories of keepers getting fired for doing so. I actually had to omit some of that stuff because this person was just talking about things that, just was not necessary, like things with his girlfriend. It's like, where's this coming from? I just want to hear more about Wallace the Wallaby. Not a zookeeper, but I once helped take care of elephants at a summer camp in Florida. We made toys for them, which mostly included giant leaf balls covered in peanut butter and assorted nuts and fruit. Watch elephants scramble around it, frantically licking the ball as it rolled around in the dirt, was quite an experience and had to be one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Love those big beasts. I interned at a zoo last summer as a vet tech and a keeper. I was able to work with the kangaroos, wolves, coyotes, eagles, Andean condors, as well as the farm and education animals. One afternoon, another intern and I went to go clean and feed the condors' enclosure. These birds are like 3-foot-tall vultures with a decent-sized wingspan. In order for us to go in, we need to get the male into his indoor enclosure because he can get aggressive. However, the female is quite tame. This task alone can be hit or miss, depending on how he feels. He is pretty smart, so we have to open it up and sit on the other side enticing him with some raw meat or fish while calling him in. He will slowly walk in front of the indoor enclosure, eyeing us and the meat. Some days he will perch on a big rock that's sitting directly in front of the indoor enclosure, knowing there is food there, but still ignoring us. Luckily, this particular day he decides to come in and we close him off. Then we head in to clean the outside exhibit, grabbing our tools and trays of meat. As we're finishing up, the female condor decides to accompany us to the door. While we're exiting, she then finds my co-worker's phone in her back pocket to be very interesting. She then latches onto the back pocket, and I start to grab a rake to try and sway her off my co-worker. All the while, my co-worker is starting to freak out a bit, slightly trying to get away with this condor attached to her back pocket. The condor does let go soon afterwards, and we laugh it off once the adrenaline wears off a bit. I'm not a fan of the reptiles or cockroaches that I had to feed, and the small mammals weren't my favorite, but I like the ferrets, and the 15 goats we had pooped a lot. I used to work at a safari park in Scotland. Generally, most animals were sound. I quite enjoyed this one little feared beast called an Anoa. They are basically big dog-sized cows and live in pairs. This one had a bad reputation because it was seen as mean. However, the poor thing never did anything bad to me, and I liked spending time with it. I even snuck it in a few apples from time to time. It was separated from all other animals because one day it had gone under a camel and stabbed it repeatedly in the belly with his horns. So they tranquilized the Anoa and his partner to move them, but she died, and so he was alone. Poor wee dude. Worst overall was Chippy the chimp, who was a complete bellend and went out of his way to show it to everyone. He would eat the other chimp's favorite foods, even though he didn't even like them. Bit of a wee prick, our friend Chippy. Most feared animals in the park, though, were the otters. Sweetest little chirps when they're hungry, but clever, fast, and bitey as heck. I have never jumped so high as when I was in their enclosure, giving them things to play with when the food ran out to distract them. And they realized I was in there with them, and they came bolting after me. Must have cleared 6 feet. I did a 6-month work experience in a small zoo in the UK. The best animal to look after was a big tegu called Reggie. Watching him eat dead rats was morbidly fascinating. The worst animal to feed were the Humboldt penguins. The greedy little sods would bite my shins every frickin' day. I'd come home with a ring of purple bruises just below my knee. If you do happen to love penguins and are near Edinburgh Zoo, anytime you can see, take a march around the park at lunchtime. I think one of them is a member of the Norwegian army for some reason. He has a little medal for his flipper. It's adorable. Damn, this was 7 years ago, so I can't really confidently say whether or not that's still there, because I'm like, yeah, I'll go to Edinburgh Zoo to see a little medal on a penguin. That sounds cool. I worked at a large pet store that had many exotic pets and was kind of like going to the zoo, minus the lions, tigers, bears, etc. I worked in the reptile room and definitely had my favorites. Pretty much all of the lizards, except lecker geckos, were chill. The little snakes we had were rude. It was a gamble of if you were going to get bit whenever you had to stick your hand in there. It didn't hurt, but was annoying. The gopher snakes and tree boa you also had to watch carefully. On the other hand, the pythons and sand boas were docile. A large caiman iguana bit half of my thumbnail off, which was really disappointing because I was the only one that would go in her room and spend time with her. Sometimes the things we love hurt us the most. Honestly, I love working with all of them. Sloths are definitely one of my favorites as far as hands-on goes, I love working with big cats and grizzly bears because they have a lot of character. Big cats are seriously just house cats, but bigger. Penguins are fun to work with, but they are the worst to clean up after. They eat fish all day, which makes their poop acidic and smelly. It gets everywhere and destroys the paint on the floor. A donkey once bit my fish at a mall petting zoo. I still like donkeys, though. They're cool. True words were never said. Obligatory, not a zookeeper, but my answer for both are horses. I was a ranch hand for 2 years in college and discovered you could tell a horse's personality and intelligence by how they kept their stall. Dirty and disgusting stall typically means the horse is a butthole and doesn't respond well to direction. We also housed other horses, and if you're wondering, ponies all have a Napoleonic complex and are douchebags. Also, I can never eat A1 steak sauce again because of that job. TLDR, don't be a ranch hand, kids. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, and if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.